Substantiate, to establish by proof or competent evidence. Welcome back to Substantiate. I'm the host, William Glasser, bringing you hypothetical sports matchups every single week. Welcome back to Substantiate, and this week Joe Daley is joining me again. You may remember him from an episode back in either the end of February or early March, around that time, where we talked about what NBA players would be good football players in a fantasy football scenario, so going for stats. And that was a really fun episode. You can catch that down in the show notes. And I'm not going to take up too much time here, but you know the drill. Check out our social medias at SubstantiatePod. Great clips over on Instagram. And yeah, so you can also sign up for our email list. That link is also downstairs in the show notes. And yeah, so that's going to be it, and let's get right into this episode with Joe Daley from the Airing It Out podcast. Today, I'm joined by Joe Daley from the Airing It Out podcast. How are you today, Joe?
Good, William. How you doing, man?
Good. It's been a few months since we last had you on. I'm pretty sure you're our first guest to come back for a second episode that wasn't a two-parter, so welcome back.
Hey, listen, when you reached out to me, I had such a good time the first time that I was more than happy to come back. So thanks for having me back on. I really appreciate that, man. It'll be fun, as always.
Yep, of course. And so last time, first of all, if you haven't listened to that episode, go find it. I'll link to it down in the show notes. And in that episode, we talked about what NBA players would be the best fantasy football players. So go check that out. And then at the beginning of that episode, we also talked for maybe 10-ish minutes about just free agency and what was going on at the time. And since then, the Deshaun Watson situation has completely derailed, and I don't think we'll dip too much into that because most of what's known has already been said. So today we're going to focus mostly on the draft, but it looks like you have something to say, Jeff.
Yeah, I mean, just with the Deshaun Watson thing, at least from a fantasy perspective, if you own him in a dynasty league, you got to be shaking in your boots a little bit here. The NFL's got to do what they got to do. If any of those allegations are true, and there's many allegations, then obviously he needs to sit out, and whatever else suspensions, things need to come down. But from a fantasy perspective, he's someone that even if he's available later, I'm keeping him off my boards. Unless there's any sort of clarity there. It's a scary scenario in every aspect. Yeah, we were talking about, where might he be playing? Now is he playing at all? So pretty weird fallout from all that, but yeah.
And if he does get suspended, is he likely to get suspended for a year? What's the general suspension for this kind of stuff?
For the amount of allegations, this is kind of, at least to my knowledge, pretty unprecedented. So it remains to be seen. Where the NFL is doing their investigation. There's obviously the civil cases and that investigation. So there's so many things to happen before there's any decision. But I gotta imagine that it's going to be pretty lengthy if it does come down to go down that road. So it'll be certainly interesting to see. But
yeah, the last thing you want in fantasy football or any fantasy sport is you draft a player and then they don't play for the whole season, whether it's because they get injured or, in this case, a suspension, which seems to be likely. But coming back to the NFL draft, and here, this was probably really highly talked about just because of whether it was the pandemic or other things going on. I felt like it was a bit more in the spotlight this year. And everyone knew the names. It seemed like Trevor Lawrence, Zach Wilson, Kyle Pitts, Trey Lance, all those big names, all the quarterbacks coming out in this year's draft. And it's a bit ironic in that sense because many analysts have called it not that deep of a class, yet so many people know the first round names. So if we look at all of these, which players, at least we'll start with the top of the first round, are going to have the biggest impacts this year, and which ones were drafted for potential and still need to be groomed?
Here's the thing. As far as I'm concerned, I don't think you can go that far down the draft board until you hit Kyle Pitts. And he's going to be an absolute monster for the Falcons. The Atlanta Falcons, as you know, they like to feature a tight end. They have for years, especially with Matt Ryan. He does not shy away from the tight end position. Now, last year, their guy was Hayden Hurst. I hate to even call him their guy. He really didn't do much, especially if you owned him in fantasy. You're thinking, oh, Falcons tight end, let's go. But didn't really pay off for you. But Kyle Pitts, I think a lot of draft experts agree. He might have been the best player in the draft overall, from any position. Obviously, the quarterbacks are the most important for a team, but
talent-wise,
yeah, right. And if those top teams had quarterbacks, I gotta imagine one of those first three teams would have taken Kyle Pitts, but they were quarterback needy, which is why they were picking at the top of the draft. But I mean, Kyle Pitts, I think he's like 6'6", 245. He's just an athletic monster and the type of guy that you can just get him to a spot and he can go up and snag that ball. Especially for an aging Matt Ryan, I think he will rely heavily on that. And think about this too. Investing in that offense, fantasy wise, is going to be huge for you because I think right out the gate, it's not like he's the only show in town as far as pass catchers. You also have obviously Julio Jones. There's a little bit of trade talk about him recently, but it looks like nothing came of that.
Yeah.
But you have him, who again is another athletic monster, big guy. He's proven himself year in and year out. Gets a little hurt here and there, but Calvin Ridley coming along strong a few years in as another great wide receiver opposite of Julio. And then here you go with Kyle Pitts, gonna attack that center of the field. But the thing with Kyle Pitts is you can move him around and use him anywhere. So I think Kyle Pitts is going to absolutely be a star this year, fantasy and in real life. So he's someone that, if you can't get the Kelsey and you can't get the Kittle in those first two, maybe if they last the third round, which this year I don't think they will. I think Kyle Pitts could be in a shaky position like tight end. He could be someone that could really slot in right around where those guys are immediately. So I think he's someone that for me, he again can be an impact player right out the gate. I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about the quarterbacks here. Trevor Lawrence, obviously, he deserved to be the number one pick out of Clemson. He's proven he can play in big spots, national championships, the whole nine. I mean, I think I heard this correctly. He hasn't lost a regular season game in his football career dating back to like youth or high school or whatever, but he's probably set to do that pretty soon with the Jaguars. But we've seen some success out of guys like Gardner Minshew. Again, he wasn't Tom Brady out there, but he was able to move the ball around. And Trevor Lawrence is about 10 times the quarterback as Gardner Minshew is right out the gate. So I think he's someone that again can come out and have a good deal of success. I'm not saying they're going to make the playoffs, but I think he personally can have some great success. And the other guy, and again, I'm kind of cherry picking here from the top here, but Trey Lance, I think, is someone that, yes, he's kind of in the middle. I think he can develop quite a bit coming out of North Dakota State. So smaller school, the competition is, right. And the competition is not as much, if you're going with one of these big conference schools, right. But I think he is someone that in Kyle Shanahan's scheme and the run schemes that are so intricate and hard to stop, he's a runner himself. He's athletic enough where he can make all the throws, but he can also, get outside and he can mow over people. So again, fantasy, real life, I think he could immediately slot in and start to have, again, not Patrick Mahomes success, but enough success to get that team back into Super Bowl contention. I mean, I don't know if I've seen a quarterback come into the NFL and have this ready-made a team around him. And again, they drafted high. They had so many injuries last year, and plus they traded up to get into that spot. I mean, their draft pick wasn't great before this, but they traded up to get to the third spot. They're mortgaging everything on getting the guy they wanted. If it couldn't be one of those top two, Trey Lance was who they really were intrigued by, and that's where they went. So I think with Kyle Shanahan calling the plays there, really in a great defense, he's set up for quite a bit of success. So I really like his potential straight out the gate.
Well, and also with Trey Lance in fantasy wise, so the 49ers, they also still have Jimmy Garoppolo. And there's been plenty of speculation, even before the draft, of, well, A, do they just not take a quarterback and take Kyle Pitts instead? And then they would have arguably the two best tight ends in the league with. But
be hard to stop.
Right. So obviously, there's a few things that could happen with this quarterback duo. Either one could play much better than the other and they start the rest of the season. Right. One gets hurt, or, which seems probable, is they wind up splitting some time, have Trey Lance ease into it. So if Trey Lance, if he starts the season splitting a lot of the time and then maybe working up his starting and snap count towards the end of the year, then could you see that as either some kind of value trade or waiver pickup towards the middle of the season?
You're talking on a fantasy perspective?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I should have prefaced my comments earlier with, I think he starts the year. And again, I could be completely wrong on that, but I think you pay the capital for that. I felt like they would have moved Garoppolo at some point, but again, before the draft, but you never know with injuries and stuff. So my inkling is that he actually starts the year, but I could see him sitting behind. And in that case, I think Trey Lance is someone that, if you're a savvy fantasy player, he might be someone that in those late rounds after you've picked a defense and a kicker, that maybe he's someone that you roll the dice on a little bit. A lot of people, when in Patrick Mahomes' second year, the first year in which he started, took Mahomes in like one of those last rounds, second to last round, just as a flyer. Who knows if this guy will be any good? I mean, now, yeah. We all know, and he's going in the top, couple rounds there. But I think for sure, if you're a savvy player and you have some space and you've kind of filled all the holes of your team, he's someone you might stash here because he has that upside of the running ability in a run scheme like Kyle Shanahan, to really do some damage. Again, a Garoppolo situation, he's not someone you're probably drafting, but where Trey Lance, there's that upside there. And if they were to switch to him, if they do start with Garoppolo and they switch to him and you have him on your bench, but you also have, like a Lamar Jackson or Josh Allen or Dak, or, maybe you went with one of the top quarterbacks too. He could be some trade fire where sell him before people know if he's going to light the league on fire, or you wait and see, and maybe he has a couple of games, but you already have a good quarterback. So he's someone, like you said, could be a great pickup. And that's why I talk from the perspective of try to grab him before everyone's trying to grab him. So when we talk waiver pickup, if they're switching over to this guy, maybe he's got some easy matchups coming up. Everyone's going to be either using their waiver wire position or their free agent budget, their fab money. So I always say strategize to be ahead of the game. And he's a quarterback. Again, I think he has a lot of upside going forward.
So maybe save the backup quarterback for one of the later rounds and try to pick him up there.
Yeah, and typically, depending on bench size for the leagues I'm in, if it's a pretty normal sized bench, I will only roster one quarterback and I'll deal with, his bye week, or, if there's an injury or something like that, obviously you got to scramble, but I'll deal with the bye week issue, drop one of my kind of unused bench players. But in this case, I'd say, for a player of his style where I think the running is really going to be something like a Lamar Jackson, where maybe not as fast, but, someone who has that athletic ability in the run scheme like that. They're probably going to throw some wrenches at teams to get them confused. And he offers that, and he can make all the throws. That's the thing too. He can also sit in the pocket and do it as well. He's super athletic, do it off balance. He's a great guy. So that's someone that I wouldn't mind actually taking a backup quarterback. But that's just my style. Typically only roster one, but he's an exception. Someone like that.
Yeah. So while we were talking about him, I looked up Jimmy Garoppolo's contract, and his base salary this year is $24.1 million, and his cap hit is 26 point almost 4.
Right.
So I don't know the ins and outs of the salary cap, but I know June 1st or June 2nd, there's a significant date in there. And is there a chance that the 49ers have some sort of prearranged deal to wait until June and then send him off somewhere?
I mean, it's certainly possible. some people, with this, I don't know if you're going to ask about the Aaron Rodgers news, but there's something, something there to be said that if he isn't going to be with the Packers, waiting till that time allows quite a bit of cap relief, right? It's less of a hit, I should say. So being able to get to that date, I could see it with Garoppolo. Not everyone was able to fill up their quarterback needs or, something along the way. And again, here's the other thing. You never know, this would be a month after that or so, a couple of months. When training camp hits, injuries pop up left and right. Now with Garoppolo, I thought, and maybe this is me just connecting the easiest dot. Belichick liked him. Might they arrange a little trade back there? But then they took Mac Jones, another guy who I think will need to develop a little bit. To answer the question before, I think Mac Jones is a guy that, it's the Patriots, so he certainly is in a great system, but I think they'll ease him in.
Yeah, we saw how Tom Brady developed.
He developed into something okay, right? Something like that.
Borderline.
Yeah, we'll see. Maybe a Hall of Famer. But it'll be interesting to see kind of how this plays out with Garoppolo. They're saying he's the guy, but they also didn't tell it. They were very tricky with what was going on with the draft too. So this is all, everyone's putting their mask on, not really telling everyone what they're doing, of course, and that's strategy. But we'll see. We'll see how it plays out. Yeah. I know they like Garoppolo. They don't dislike him, but he's hurt all the time. So that'll go into a trade. That'll be part of negotiations. But for the team that might want to receive him. But yeah, I think that salary cap where it's less of a hit certainly makes him more appealing to other teams.
Yeah. All right. So now if we drop down a little, and we'll get to the intangibles, at least fantasy-wise, a little later. So that would be the offensive linemen and some of the defensive players. But right now, if we look down the board a little bit, and at Justin Fields, number 11, the Giants trade back with the Bears. The Bears go up. They take him. And the Eagles also semi-screwed over the Giants by trading up, switching with Dallas, and taking Devonta Smith, who apparently the Giants were going to take. So, anyway, this situation in Chicago, and I've looked it up a couple times and haven't been able to really find definitive answers, but they signed Andy Dalton this offseason.
To a one-year deal, yeah.
Regardless, they posted on Twitter and Instagram, I think, QB1.
Yeah. Got to give the guy some confidence at that time. Listen, they didn't say forever. It's, right then, QB1. But yeah, it was pretty funny to see. I don't think that'll be the case going forward at all. Justin Fields is a phenomenal talent, just a fantastic quarterback with all the skills, kind of like you're saying, the intangibles, the leadership. He's played in big spots. National championship, all this stuff. He right out the gate, because he's an athlete, because he can make the throws, he automatically brings what's a good team. People forget they beat the Super Bowl champion Buccaneers. Like their defense is good. They have skill position players. They got Allen Robinson, Darnell Mooney, who I think is going to flash this year. So he was one of those, used him in DFS a couple of times last year and could really pay off. He's someone that, Justin Fields is coming into a great situation in a division that's pretty top heavy, right? The Lions, not so great, but you have the Packers, the Vikings, the Bears always in contention, in recent years. I think the Bears are a serious contender. I don't know that they're going to make it to a Super Bowl this year, but I think in the North, they have a chance. They certainly have the ability to steal that away from Green Bay.
Especially if Aaron Rodgers leaves. Yeah.
Then we have a much worse division than what we're used to in the NFC North. So, I certainly more of a two good teams too, not so great, but Aaron Rodgers covers up a lot of holes for that team. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how the North shakes out. But certainly, I think Justin Fields has the capability. And I saw something on, I think, social media. Don't know if it was true, but or what the source was. But I guess on the test, like the aptitude test that they give like quarterbacks and players and stuff like that, I think he scored one of the highest scores ever, or maybe the highest score in like the history of this test for the NFL. which is awesome. That's good to see, because quarterback is such a position of not just your arms, it's about what's between your ears. And if he's someone that can make great decisions and know his offense, read the defenses, and kind of play that game, I think he'll develop even quicker. Certainly, the NFL game moves faster than college, and him coming from a big program like Ohio State, playing great competition all the time, I think that again works in his favor.
Yeah.
So we'll see how it goes. But I'm really high on Justin Fields, and I thought that was a great move by the Bears to go up and get him. Get your guy. He slipped. So,
and also a great move for the Giants, because they got an extra first-round pick next year. I think it was a 4th or 5th round pick this year, and if it was 4th this year, 5th next year, or vice versa. So they picked up a lot. Now they're going into next year's draft with 10 picks, I think, including later trades.
Yeah.
So I mean, it was a good trade, both sides. And then Dallas, right after them, selects Micah Parsons. Again, defense. I know you're a Dallas fan. How do you feel about that pick?
Listen, I went into this draft. I wasn't looking, you want to see all the offensive skill position players. Certainly as a fantasy guy, that's more exciting.
They already have 2 great wide receivers and a great quarterback.
So that's why I went into this thinking, we need a defense. We need help on defense. Get as many players. In every mock draft you saw, on every television show, on every ticker at the bottom, mock draft this, every website, everything said we were getting one of those 2 corners, right? Surtain out of Alabama, and then J.C. Horn, 2 great corners.
Who wind up going 8 and 9, much ahead.
Yeah, it's just, and it stung a little bit because, I was looking into those guys quite a bit, saying, okay, all right, ready for the pros, this. And we need all the help we can get there. And then we go with a linebacker when, yes, we have some injury situations there, but we do have 2 young linebackers. Sure, Sean Lee just retired, former Penn State linebacker, played some great years, especially the Romo years. Not so much lately. He's been hurt. He's hurt his whole career. But then, Micah Parsons, again, great, but he's a character issue too. That a lot of talk around disciplinary issues. And then the corner we take, disciplinary issues as well. So, and that's the Cowboys. That's
I was about to
that's
say.
what they do. But but great players. So let's see how this pans out. Some of these guys they took a little bit later. They took a lot of defensive back pieces. So that's where we need the most help. We got a couple of pass rushers. So we'll see. We'll see how everything. We also have a new defensive coordinator. Name is escaping me from the Falcons.
Looking it up.
Yeah.
Dan Quinn.
Dan Quinn. There you go.
Dan Quinn.
Yes, Dan Quinn from the Falcons. He's our new coordinator on the defense. So maybe some scheme issues will start to kind of help themselves out because we've drafted some talented athletic players, but it just hasn't panned out scheme-wise. It hasn't panned out in a bunch of different ways. So as a Cowboys fan, I'm on a wait-and-see approach. There wasn't any one pick where I was like, yes, we got our guy. So we'll see how it all trickles down and all that.
All right, now, before we continue back with this, give me 1 minute to tell you about Built Bar. You've heard me talk about them a few times already on the podcast, and it is the best protein bar there is. They have high protein, high fiber, low carbs, and low sugar. They taste delicious, and they have amazing flavors: cookies and cream, double chocolate, coconut, peanut butter brownie, salted caramel, and mint brownie, which is one of my favorites. And starting today, which is the day before this is being released, Tuesday, tonight they released birthday cake with sprinkles with white chocolate on it. And right after I'm done recording this, I am going downstairs and ordering a box including birthday cake because that looks delicious. And all of these bars, they're covered in 100% real chocolate. And in the birthday cake's case, 100% real white chocolate. But all of it's so good, and it doesn't leave you with some kind of chalky aftertaste that sometimes comes with the other bars. And maybe you don't want to get a full thing of bars. Well, they have Built Bites, which are around half the size of a Built bar. They have Built Go, which you can pour into water, and then you've got yourself an energy drink. They've got Built Boost for some immune defense, and even Built Broth. So they've got tons of things. Go over to BuiltBar.com and you can use code SUBSTANTIATE, SUBSTANTIATE, to get yourself 10% off BuiltBar.com for the best protein bar there is. And if you still don't believe me that it's that healthy and still tastes that good, go over to BuiltBar.com, scroll down, and they have a little chart there that shows you all of the different nutrition facts comparing Built Bar to a bunch of the other bars. And if you don't believe me now, then you will be amazed at how great this thing is. And then all you got to do is buy it and try it for yourself. And I promise that it is the best bar I've ever had. Yeah, so continuing with oh my god picks, that was brutal. Usually it's, whether it's the Jets or someone else early up with just a terrible front office that makes a terrible pick. And especially as a Giants fan, having it be the Jets many years, like when they picked Sam Darnold, it was a little bit like, okay. But this year, it was a bit of the Giants. They showed, or I was watching it on the ESPN, and I think was on a couple other channels as well. And the Giants picked Kadarius Toney, he wasn't one of the big receivers, or big, not physically, big name receivers coming out of this draft, which pretty much ended with Devonta Smith. And he's the next wide receiver to go. It's not like he's a bad wide receiver, but especially the Giants and a lot of Giants fans wanted a pass rusher or Devonta Smith. And especially having Kwity Paye go one pick afterwards. So Kwity Paye was available with this pick. I think they should have gone with Kwity Paye here. But for Kadarius Toney, who they do pick, when it comes to fantasy and this Giants offense with Jason Garrett, it's Jason Garrett's first full year to work with, Jason Garrett, Dallas. His first full year to work with Saquon Barkley. It's his second year to work with Daniel Jones, get things going there, and who knows what the tight end position will look like. Who knows what Kyle Rudolph and Evan Ingram will look like this year. But Kadarius Toney, with an already filled wide receiver room, how does he fit into the Giants' offense when it comes to fantasy? Because he may not get too many targets.
Well, here's the thing with the Giants. I think that, like you said a little bit earlier, they made a good pick to pick up some first rounders and all that fun stuff. So they have some draft capital going forward that I think will help them. I think for this year, we can say, it's a pretty full wide receiver room. We do have a Kenny Golladay. He's your, again, big target, kind of like a Julio sort of thing.
Yeah.
But, he's had some injury history. So that's something there. Golden Tate, he's up there in age. You got all these pieces that what I want to do, if I'm the GM, if I'm Gettleman, I want to make sure that I have my guy at quarterback. That's got to be a priority to me. So I give him a pass catcher. Yes, we can use I'm a Cowboys fan, so I hate the Giants. But yes, you can use New York can use a pass rusher, and certainly the guys you mentioned would have been good picks. But Tony's he's a playmaker. He's someone that you get him in space, he can really do some big things. And Daniel Jones has proven that if he has some talent around him, he can throw off script. He can do the sort of things that today's NFL quarterback needs to do. Give him the weapons to show what he can do. That's my biggest thing. And yes, we need some offensive line help. They started to improve a little bit last year. They've been awful for years, and we saw some improvement there last year. Give them all the play. I mean, and also think about this. They're in a division with the Cowboys, full of playmakers. They'll get you anywhere. Like on offense, they can hit you anywhere on the field. You have the Eagles, which, we'll see how it shakes out with Jalen Hurts and how good he can be. And it will certainly, and now Devonta Smith. And again, I think that they were burned a little bit there. That's why, the Giants traded back because they didn't get their guy. The Cowboys allowed the Eagles to jump them. So that was an interesting dynamic too. Trading within the division is always interesting. And they were all like right there as far as picking in the early teens.
Yeah. At one point it was going to be 3 picks in a row, NFC East. And then just a few picks later at 19, the Washington football team.
Yeah, it was pretty intense to watch that whole scenario shake out. But I think, like I said, give him the playmakers to see what he can actually do. He'll get Saquon Barkley back this year and really give him a full compliment and let him use that athleticism. Let's see what he can do. He throws a lot of picks. He fumbles the ball often, so ball security is an issue. If he can get those things tidied up and this offense can start clicking on all cylinders, I think Kadarius Toney could end up being a good pick. Like I said, they were able to get some draft capital. It was almost like a bit of a luxury pick. Yeah, they need some help on defense, but I think they made a decent pick there. I think if they went there or edge rusher, either way was going to be good. If they got Devontae Smith, we'd be having a different, it's certainly a step down in receiver, but I mean, I think Kadarius Toney has potential. So we'll see. We'll see how it shakes out. And that's a lot of this. It's hard to really grade all of these because you really never know in the pro game how guys are going to shake out and how quickly they catch on to how the NFL, the speed of the NFL.
And I saw Jabril Peppers. He had posted the Giants defense or cornerback or safety, whatever they've been playing now. And Jabril, he posted on his Instagram story a few days ago. It was a picture of Devontae Smith in one of the Eagles' offices and Kadarius Toney with the Giants. And Smith was just a serious face, not smiling, and Kadarius Toney smiling ear to ear, and he's like, getting drafted by the Eagles, getting drafted by the Giants.
I didn't see that. That's fantastic. That's good. That's good.
It's too bad they didn't have drafted by the Cowboys.
I know. Listen. I'm almost surprised that with Devontae Smith there, Jerry Jones think, oh yeah, let's get another one in here. I mean, it would have been awesome. Just, the receiving core would be absolutely unstoppable, but way too crowded of a room. But but it wouldn't have made any sense. That's why I thought Jerry might have done it. But we'll see. I got to say this too. I think you were saying earlier about with regards to teams, disappointing year in and year out. I really think the Jets had one of the better drafts of this year. I mean, certainly they picked number 2. You're going to get a good player. They got Zach Wilson, but I mean, even some of the things they did a little bit later in the first round and going forward, they really filled a lot of holes. Use the draft capital that they've accumulated recently to their advantage. I mean, getting Elijah Vera Tucker out of USC, the guard
at number 14,
right, and who's is versatile and could potentially play tackle, if need be. I think he's someone that you got to feel like absolute garbage. If you're Sam Darnold, hey, hello, where was this help?
Yeah, the Jets have already done more for Zach Wilson than they ever did for Sam Darnold.
It's hard to, you just feel bad. I hope he flourishes in Carolina. He's someone else who's got some nice weapons in Carolina to play alongside. So we'll see. But yeah, just watching the Jets actually work. Joe Douglas, the GM, actually making some good decisions. And Right.
So now he gets his quarterback, and we'll see how different it is. And there were some talks, especially with some news coming out about Trevor Lawrence, I've mentioned it in a few episodes now in different topics, just not being fully committed to football in the sense football isn't everything to him. He loves his family also, which is normal, but at the same time,
don't want to knock him too hard for loving his family, right?
Right. And then also at the same time, Tom Brady, he could be wherever he wants, doing whatever he wants. But right now he's in Tampa playing football with Gronkowski and his other 20 starting teammates that all came back.
Yeah, that's going to be an interesting thing to watch is how the Bucks, returning, like you said, so many people from that championship team, they're going to be tough to beat in that division for sure. And certainly I think the NFC, everyone's looking up at them, and it's crazy to keep on year in and year out saying, oh, Tom Brady, he's there, and he's going to keep on keeping on, so to speak. He's just going to, you see Aaron Rodgers and he just wants some offensive pieces, some this and that. And Tom Brady goes to the Buccaneers, and they didn't automatically just give him whatever he wanted, but they involved him in the process. He wanted Gronk, they got Gronk. They were reluctant to get AB. Guess what? They got AB. Why? Because it was going to help Brady in the offense. Brady is not
Leonard Fournette,
Mahomes or Jackson or these athletic guys. he needs the help. Offensive line, they drafted some guys last year. They shored that up. The defense, I mean, the return, it's just insane to see that. And then you look at a guy in Aaron Rodgers who's obviously displeased where he is, and it's alarming to say the least, but watching these player personnel decisions and with the Jets, I think Joe Douglas is really going to turn this around. I love their coach now, Robert Saleh, the old defensive coordinator for the Niners. Certainly, I think we'll get them right on the path. Even some of their what was Elijah Moore out of Mississippi, probably one of the best slot receivers in the draft. I'd say, like, if he's not the best, he's one of them. Super fast, speedy guy. Has the ability to run really crisp routes, which is something that you want to see as well. So, I mean, they got him. What was that? The third round, maybe second round?
No, that was
round.
the second. That was the 34th overall pick.
And if you're watching the draft, you heard a lot of like the Mel Kipers and them saying like, "Oh, where's this Elijah Moore gonna go? Where's he gonna go?" And again, they trade up in the second to get. They trade back into the first to get Elijah Vera Tucker out of USC. Get some offensive line help to help protect. You got Elijah Moore, which, that middle of the field type of threat. And then, even a little bit later, I want to say it's the fourth round, Michael Carter out of UNC, out of North Carolina, running back who certainly has some chops, and I think adds that playmaking ability to a team that is starting to come together. I think offensively could make some noise. I think they're looking up still at the Dolphins and the Bills for sure. I think the Bills are the favorite for that division, but let's not forget the Patriots,
don't count them out.
Right? COVID stuff. A lot of people sat out.
Don't bet against Brady. Don't bet against Belichick.
Yeah, those, and that's been for the better part of 20 years. So, it'll be, again, like I said, it's going to be crazy to see how this all shakes out. I'm so excited for this NFL season because I think, with some of the normalcy coming back to our world and sports and fans being able to come back, I think it's just going to be an absolutely wild, like, celebration of a year for everyone. And then we'll see how it all pans out on the field. But I think it's going to be fun. A lot of contenders for the Super Bowl this year, especially my Dallas Cowboys. Can't even say that with confidence. It's sad, but
Yeah, I mean, so long as everyone stays healthy, and they're especially towards the top of this draft class, there are so many exciting players, and so many of the quarterbacks look to be starters, and as well as the wide receivers, and hopefully we're going to see a lot of them pretty quickly pan out in the league, and next year that's all exciting, and just to get back to it, and there's sort of a bit of a transition in the NFL almost, just because it is towards the end of Brady's career, and Brady's redefined how long an NFL player can play. Aaron Rodgers is now sitting here saying, okay, I could either retire now, I'm like 38, or I could play for another 6 years somewhere else. And so, 10 years ago, if Aaron Rodgers were in the same position, A, he wouldn't be getting the same money, and B, he may not have wanted to because he probably didn't think it was possible. And then now Brady's proved everyone wrong that, well, I'm not sure how many people doubted that he could, but he's really redefined it in that sense. And when you look at these young quarterbacks, you think, man, to think that Trevor Lawrence could still be playing 20 years from now, and to think of me just 34 years old sitting on a couch watching Trevor Lawrence playing, it's just so crazy to think that that's all still possible years down the line.
Yeah, and what's so incredible about it, and like you said, it's the idea that it's even a possibility. And with, again, modern medicine and modern techniques of keeping yourself healthy, these are just things that weren't even thought of back in the day. But you look at Brady with his TB12 stuff and the pliability and all that. I mean, it you can't knock it because it's clearly working. And everyone sees that, so they're like, well, I want to do that too. And I think you're going to see a lot of this longevity for these players. And for us as sports fans, and certainly as NFL fans, that's awesome. I mean, it's just cool to know that I can be fans of, and so many people are fans of players as opposed to teams, especially NBA fans. Seems to be a lot of things. If I'm a LeBron fan, I'm going to follow him wherever.
That's me.
And I'm still more of a team guy. Like, even if my favorite player gets traded off to them, I'm going to be mad. But and again, I'm a little older than you, so that's kind of the way I grew up. But it's just you see this ability for your favorite players out there to be a part of the league for as long as they possibly can. It used to be, and this was a huge thing. It used to be where you'd have a star of the league in the NFL that in the waning moments of their career, the last few years were backups that barely saw the field. I mean, now we got, like you said, Brady, and you got a Rodgers they're winning and at least in Brady's case, winning Super Bowls. So you got to be a guy like, these young guys like Josh Allen, who's, popping off, and obviously the Patrick Mahomes and all these guys looking up and saying like, all right, cool. Let's retire. Like, yeah, maybe that'll be me in 20 years, but Brady, why don't you,
Yeah.
You're in Florida already. It's a retirement community.
Yeah,
but we'll see.
And even for some of the tight ends in the league, Travis Kelce's already 31 or 32, which for a tight end is very old.
You know what? And it's crazy. And he's been in the league for quite a while, but you don't think of it because he hasn't really kind of hit the scene hard until, the Mahomes days. So when I remember hearing his age last year during the fantasy season, I don't know what it was I was listening to, but I was like, wait, what? Because in my head, I'm like, he's like 27, 26, whatever it is.
31 right now.
And then
32 in October.
But he's playing like he's 23. So, hey, again, you never know. And especially in that offense, if they could keep him as untouched as possible, he's getting open left and right. It's those skill position players like the like the running backs and the receivers, they take more of a beating, tight ends. So it's harder. With the rules in the NFL, the quarterbacks are just naturally preserved. I think the NFL realizes, hey, we want these guys to stick around for as long as they possibly can. My guy Romo from the Cowboys, he was a very polarizing guy. Kind of was a laughing stock for some people, but he's a great player, and we can see the mental capacity, when he's announcing it. It's just like his injuries piled up later on in his second half of his career to the point where he couldn't really go on. He could have, but it's at that point you want to be able to hold your kids and play with them in the backyard. So had some of these rules come in a little bit earlier stuff. You got these guys like Brady, like Rodgers, who could really kind of sail out into the end of their career and still be competing for Super Bowls, which is fun. I mean, that matchup last year, that Super Bowl matchup or this past year, was fantastic. You got the young goat, the old goat,
exactly,
and the OG prevailed, so to speak. So it's just like it's fun. It's fun, and as a football fan and a fantasy guy, hey, fantastic. Let's keep it going.
And Tony Romo, he's
my boy.
Like, I know there's a bunch of random Hall of Fames, especially for smaller things like broadcasting.
Sure.
But no doubt Tony Romo will wind up in one, if not many of them one day. But he's a lot like Alex Rodriguez in Sunday Night Baseball broadcasts. And A-Rod, he'll predict a pitch that's coming.
Right.
And he'll be like, oh, yeah, no, that's a slider. And he doesn't need any trash cans like the Houston Astros.
Nice.
And Tony Romo's like that on the broadcasts also. He'll tell you exactly where the play is going. And it really shows just how smart of a player he was. And also that reflects on the coaching staff, because everyone in the NFL is expected to know how to do their job. If you're on defense, you're expected to know how to tackle someone. If you're a quarterback, you're expected to know how to throw a ball. And there's minor mechanical things, but very infrequently you're teaching a guy, or if you're converting a position or something, where you're literally teaching them how to do something physically. And more often than not, it's a lot of the planning and mental skills of the game. And you would think that for someone, or for Dallas in general, that would be an appeal for quarterbacks to go there, yet they still opt, rather than to go with free agency, to go with Dak Prescott, who I believe was a draft pick.
Yeah, he was a fourth rounder back in, I want to say it was 2016.
Exactly. So developing a fourth rounder again, it's something that you have to give credit to the Dallas coaching staff.
Yeah, and it really is for such a barbaric sport where people are trying to rip each other's heads off. It
Yep.
really is a lot of mental. It's a chess game, and that's why having good coaching staff, having these guys like Kyle Shanahan, as I brought up earlier, who can really scheme an offense to really suit the needs of who the players are in front of them, and then having those players be able to study the offense. And I remember seeing this. I don't know if it was part of a documentary or whatever it was, but where Brady came in to Belichick's office and broke down a play and what he thought might be like an interesting wrinkle off of that play, like to have the slot receiver, whether it was Welker or whoever it was at the time, go this way because it would bring the the safety from the opposing defense down closer to like where the linebackers were playing. And Belichick just looked at it and he said, yeah, I like that, or whatever it was. He kind of said like, let's add that. Let's put that wrinkle in so that, if you make that call at the line, and just to see that respect that kind of went both ways. Cause like, it's a chess game, and the teams that have those skills be between the ears from the coaching staff, from their playmakers. I mean, that's even receivers that can study a defender's moves and their tendencies, and then exploit those and say, hey, if the DB covering me, talk to the quarterback. If the DB covering me does this, I'm going to do this. So, and have that whole communication between your skill position players and all that. I mean, it's, you have a leg up, and that comes through studying and just the natural love of the game and knowledge of the game over time. But yeah, Tony Romo, when it comes to Hall of Fames, I know he won't be a first ballot Hall of Famer, but I think he deserves it, man. He broke so many Cowboys records. He just never had that offensive line until the end.
Cowboys
He was already
Hall
hurt.
of Fame.
Which is something, I guess. But I'm gonna toot the horn of my guy for forever. That's my dude. But Dak's been coming on. Before the injury last year, his deep ball accuracy has improved. So again, like you said, that's developing a guy who was a fourth rounder. I think he's only going up. They say he's ahead of schedule on the injury. So
yeah, the thing where I think drafting someone, and I'm not sure what year they drafted him or how long he was behind Romo, but for the Packers right now, I think if they drafted a quarterback in, again, a later round last year instead of the first round, right? Instead of drafting Jordan Love in the first round, if you draft him in the 4th, 5th, 6th, or 7th round, then, and obviously then you're going to tell Rodgers before that, and then that might work a little better for them, and then also still be able to get that quarterback of their future. But without getting too much into that, or into Rodgers, but and I was starting to allude to it before, some of the players that, whether it's a defensive player where you're picking a defense in fantasy, or if it's an offensive lineman, which would benefit a running back, quarterback, wide receiver. So which players that were taken in the draft, or I should say which players in fantasy, so that would be quarterback, wide receiver, tight end, running back, and defense, which players that were drafted impacted the fantasy players the most? So which fantasy players got the biggest boost from the draft?
Just to clear up, are you talking about players that are already in the league? Or could it be someone that was drafted that I think can, both, or how do you want to attack that?
We'll stick with the first there. So
okay.
Someone that was impacted. So is it the J.C. Horn being the first defensive player taken in the draft? Does he make the Panthers defense, a pick or two higher in a fantasy draft? Or does Penei Sewell going to Detroit, does that help anything else in Detroit? Or even if it's a running back being taken, even if it's Najee Harris going to the Steelers, does that help Big Ben in a fantasy draft? So stuff like that.
So the Najee Harris is going to be the guy I talked about for either one. Like, I think he makes that offense go a little bit more. And I think, like I said, for Big Ben, someone who, if I'm waiting at quarterback, he wasn't great last year. He's 1 year older, so he's not someone I might go with, but certainly a bye week filler, or if my main guy gets injured and I don't have another quarterback on my roster, I think he certainly helps that offense go a little bit more. What worries me a little bit, but this could be helped by him actually, which is kind of backwards, but I think the offensive line, some people said, well, maybe they should have went offensive line in the first round.
Yeah, I was thinking that also.
But you have a guy that needs an offensive line. The thing about Najee Harris is that he will make this offense go a little bit more as well. Yes, they have the receiving core that has shown they can be successful, but Najee Harris is he's a big bodied back that not only, he's not just like someone who's going to kind of run people over. He is a Le'Veon Bell-esque type of player that can catch balls out of the backfield and certainly make guys miss, but he can also run over some guys too with his big body stature. So I think as a whole, the Steelers offense is better. That loosens things up in the defensive backfields for Juju, who I was surprised to re-sign, but he did. Juju and so some of the other guys there as well. But he's someone that for me was a first round pick that I thought, okay, the Steelers defense was pretty good certainly the first half of the year, and tailed off a little bit towards the end. But the Steelers defense is there, and they can be successful. But the offense sputtered out at times, and Big Ben wasn't great the whole way through. I think this makes things easier for him and certainly takes a bit of the pressure off of the receivers. It's just about how will this O-line come together this year. They lost a couple of guys. I know one of their best in particular, I think their center, but we'll see how it shakes out. But I really like Najee Harris as a pick as he makes the offense better. I think any defensive pick has the potential to make the Cowboys defense a little bit better. Micah Parsons certainly is an athlete. He's a good run stopper, which again, that helps with regards to opposing defenses being able to move the ball unless they're playing a really pass heavy offense anyways. So it's just, defense is so hard to predict based on one player. It's really about scheme and talent at multiple positions. The Cowboys aren't someone I'm going to go out and get defensively, but it's certainly something that I certainly think, as opposed to last year, we talked about Trey Lance earlier. If and when he starts, which I think it will be sooner rather than later, and maybe week one, he's someone that makes all of the offensive skill positions around him way better. Okay. Running back. If you have two running threats out of the backfield in your quarterback and your running back, both of them are going to have easier time running, which is great. And Raheem Mostert was an absolute beast before the injury. And we've seen that time and time again that he can almost score from anywhere. He's that type of runner, and he's physical. So I think they have some, Brandon Ayuk and so, some of those boys out there who are absolutely athletic monsters at receiver, certainly Kittle. So he's someone that I think, especially with his playmaking ability and being able to roll out of the pocket and throw from, off platform, he's someone that all the offensive skill position players are better for it. There's Matt Ryan, I think, is going to have a bounce back year. He's one of my sleeper quarterbacks because of the skill positions.
Yeah. And then I guess the last question is, which offensive line improved the most?
Are the Jets a low hanging fruit because they were so bad and got a good guy? I mean, the Lions drafted, the Lions drafted the dude out of Oregon. I always struggle with pronouncing his name. Puel.
Penei
Sewell. Yeah, it's Penei, something like that. Again, they had a lot of room to improve. Again, it's hard to say just based on the draft which offensive lines, because you got to see what's the chemistry like. That's a big part of offensive lines too. I keep on going back to the Cowboys, but their offensive line was the gold standard for around the 2014 to maybe a couple of years ago. They were gold standard. They all were drafted and built the chemistry together. You had a lot of those guys that were picked within a year or so of each other. Like Tyron Smith, who's still their left tackle and has been one of the best minus injuries. But it'll be interesting to see how some of these things play out. But that the Lions, Penei Sewell was a good pick. But hard to really say who got the best right away. I just, like I said, for as much as the Jets are the laughingstock, I really think they did some great things on offense to help shore off the offensive line and do that. But again, we could all be wrong. That's the thing about the draft. We don't know yet. We'll see.
Yeah. Well, anyway, that's going to wrap it up here today. We talked about a bunch of different players, some players that are going to have big impacts, whether it's a character concern or just in general different free agency and in different moves going on. So, Joe, where can the listeners find you, your podcast, different social medias, and any last quick thoughts?
All right. So the podcast is anywhere you get podcasts. It's Airing It Out with Joe Daley. And it's a fantasy football podcast. Excited to announce that in the month of June, we'll really be starting to get some episodes going with that, with the, fantasy drafts coming up and post-draft, looking back at that like we did today. So that's Airing It Out with Joe Daley. The website is www.airingitout.com. Check us out there. Articles to be posted soon with the year coming up fast approaching. And on social media, you can get me on Instagram and Twitter, both at Airing It Out FF for fantasy football. Airing It Out FF. Please check us out, and we'll love to have you listen to the show. And listen, Will, it's always fun. This is 2 times, maybe third time will be a time. I love coming on with you. You're super knowledgeable and just love the show. Love the episodes you put out week in and week out. So keep doing what you're doing, man, because it's fantastic.
Yep. And we'll look to get something going again, either towards the end of the summer or middle of the season, somewhere in there. Recurring guest, Joe Daley.
Glad to be a part of the team.
we can call you that. Our first recurring
Look
guest.
At that, man. I made it. We're
in the big leagues now.
Oh yeah. No, always a pleasure, my man.
Thanks again, Joe.
All right, man. Take care.
Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed that episode. And if you did enjoy it, please share it with someone you know and tell them why you share it and why you think they're going to love listening to it. Go do that. Helps us grow the audience of the show and helps make sure that new content is coming out every week. And after you do that, if you can, if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, dropping a 5-star rating and writing a nice review, that always helps. And also, if you want to go over and give us a follow on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook at SubstantiatePod also helps a ton. But I've already taken enough time from you today. This episode is going to be a bit of a long one. So, again, hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you next week. Thank you for listening to this episode of Substantiate. The best way to help support the show is to, number 1, tell your friends about Substantiate. That is the number 1 way to support us. The second way is to leave us a 5-star review in Apple Podcasts or Podchaser. Number 3, follow us at SubstantiatePod on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook.
Hello, I'm Anthony.
And I'm Dr. Issues.
And we're hosts of Capes on the Couch, the podcast where comics get counseling.
Superheroes don't always get to go home happy. That's where we come in.
We offer psychiatric and mental health analysis of comic book characters.
So check us out at capesonthecouch.live and across all social media platforms at Capes on the Couch.